We know it's over. If we can't have freedom, no one can. Let's just blow everything up. Hi, I'm Louisa Munch, and welcome back to Northstar Politics Show. Today we break down the havoc across West Asia and the current events in Iran. We also discuss everything from the Greens' big win in Gorton and Denton, how MPs are getting a pay rise for the millionth time, and my favourite topic, the rise of nostalgia in our politics. And obviously, you know, I had to school the Northstar boys in some critical theory, even if they're a bit too philosophical for me at times. All that and lots more. Let's get into it.
One time for the one time, two time for the two time. Welcome home, Stars Dem.
Yes, sir.
You are tapped back in with Northstar Politics, pushing political imagination. Check the compass, you're right where you need to be.
Come on.
You're of course joined by myself, the Mile and Malcolm X. We didn't land on Bethnal Green, Bethnal Green landed on us. I'm stuttering over my words because I'm joined by the MP Eric Williams.
Yeah, but that's not why you're stuttering though.
I'm stuttering over my words because I'm joined by an illustrious guest. We're calling her the Manny Mary Wollstonecraft. The Danish de Beauvoir. Louisa Munch theory on every platform, but we're dealing with real life practice today. Louisa Munch, welcome to Northstar Politics.
Come on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You know what it is? I had to wear a nice little jumper today because we're in the presence of a real academic.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? I got to sit up straight and everything.
Even me, I'm here in my jeans. We've got a whole new setup, nice long table for Louisa today. How are you feeling?
Honoured. I'm honoured to be here, and well, it's been a very, very busy month for me. I mean, it's been a busy 6 months.
Just start of the month. It's been a busy month globally.
Yeah, true for all of us, everyone involved.
But you come down from Manchester today to sunny East London.
Yeah, I didn't realise that. Well, I forgot that you have a completely different climate over here.
What are you saying though? Have you realised that London's the best city in the world, or is it you still?
I don't know about that. I mean, the weather is better. Like, I brought my massive coat, and I was like, oh wait, you guys aren't battered by the elements every single day, whatever season. It's so mild.
I'm not gonna lie. I reckon the stars Dem at home will probably know about your work. But for those that don't, maybe give them a little. First of all, everyone. Head over to the other tab, Louisa Munch Theory, follow her on everything.
Definitely.
You will not regret
platform.
that. But tell them a little about your work. Supreme academic, in my opinion.
Our humble opinion.
Yeah.
Northstar approved, shall we say.
Oh, thank you, guys. Well, I just do critical theory. I teach critical theory at university, and I talk about critical theory online because I think it's a way of understanding the world that's empowering, and I think it's really important when a lot of people aren't able or don't have access to means of education that allows you to think critically. So that's kind of what I'm doing on social media.
And it's crazy because I remember reaching out to you like a couple months back, like late 2025, and I'm just scrolling on my FYP. I'm thinking, this girl's spitting like every single time, just how all these takes are just hitting. And then I click on your profile and I see follow back. I'm thinking,
yeah, I followed you first. I've been following you for ages.
No, but I'm thinking, damn, because obviously that's very humbling for me. But then two, you've actually blown up in the last, 5 months? How's that experience been? Anxiety
inducing. Oh my God. I cannot tell you how overwhelming it is in good ways and bad ways.
But people can tell that you're humble. You're not coming here to try and I think one of the things we try to do with Northstar is speak to people where they're at and actually show them that you don't have to be some, closet academic, elite academic, but rather you can just be like someone from a normal working class community and speak to people where they're at.
Yeah, and I don't really think of myself really as like an academic. I mean, having a job as an academic these days is not anything that anyone, has an impression of what an academic does. Like it's completely different. Most of us have more than one job because it doesn't pay well. It's really stressful and stuff. So yeah, there's nothing. I don't want people to think I'm like part of the academic elite because I don't think that exists anymore.
I don't think anyone will think that either. But then just talk to us a bit about critical theory then. So what is that? What is critical theory?
Critical theory is just challenging power, really. Understanding and challenging power structures. So I think if you probably Googled it, it might say the critique of ideology or something like that. But it's very much about understanding how power works in sort of invisible ways. But it's outward looking, but it's also self-reflective. So it's not just about understanding politics or systemic problems. It's also about understanding what your position is to look at those power structures and understanding, sort of inwards as well as outwards.
That makes a lot of sense. I think as well, that's something that intersects lovelyly with Northstar, because we try and look at the politics of it, but then also our perspectives on it and why we might have framed certain things. That's going to be incredibly important today with the topics we're looking at. We're going to get into the state of play.
Wait.
Chat to me.
No, but we got one more question for her. So,
of course.
This is the famous question that we always ask, right? Because obviously you have this big following online. You do your critical theory. You feel it's so important to be so consistent every single day, sharing wisdom to the masses. So what is your North Star? Why do you do what you do?
Because I think we can't have a democracy without informed citizens, and it's an emergency. We need to think critically about the world, and I think education is always the practice of freedom, and it's always where you start in any sort of change, in any kind of revolution, or even in, you know, the smallest of places, you can find that power, and that's why I do what I do.
Real. Very real.
So for today, Stars Dem at home. Obviously, slow news week. No, we'll be getting into
only World War III.
We'll be getting into a blockbuster state of play. We'll be trying to give a breakdown of a timeline of what's happened in Iran, and then get onto our perspectives on the UK's involvement, the US's involvement, the legality of it, and some analysis of the paradigm shift that's going on. We're also going to give a bit more of a positive look at politics with the Gorton and Denton by-election results. And then we'll get into the state of play. We'll get into the back roads, where Sean's got some maybe lesser known stories before we have a little bit of a let me land in an echo chamber discussing some of your work, Louisa. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Let's get into the state of play.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Also, we call it West Asia around here.
Okay.
Which is, you know, decentralized.
Love that.
Oh, you're so woke, fam. Just call it.
So, of course, the biggest news over the past week has been the ensuing war in West Asia. And what we're going to do, Stars Dem, to try and break this down is give what we think is the most requisite context. We're going to give, you know, a brief timeline, and then we're going to talk about some of the impacts and outcomes for certain states and certain actors that we think are quite important. So a bit of context that we think is important is last summer we had Israel conducting major airstrikes on Iran's nuclear and military facilities during ongoing negotiations with the US. So we've seen over the weekend talks about Iran getting towards the negotiation table. But what's really important to understand is last week basically saw the conclusion or final stages of a negotiation process whereby Iran had agreed to enrich 0 grams of uranium. That was better than the deal that was brokered by Obama in the Obama era, whereby they were enriching a small amount of uranium for civilian activities. But on Friday, in a quite surprising event, an Omani diplomat who was overseeing the negotiations went on US TV to say, explicitly, we are in the final stages of reaching a peace deal with Iran, whereby Iran will be normalized into the international society, and there will be like no longer a nuclear threat and will be totally non-proliferating. Also worth bearing in mind that theologically, a lot of like the top brass of Iranian politics don't actually agree with nuclear weapons. So it was always a contested thing, even domestically. So that's sort of the background. Also, a very important bit of background is to remind everyone that earlier this year, a little known thing called the Epstein files were massively released. Donald Trump mentioned more times in the Epstein files than Jesus mentioned the Bible, and has been leveraging arms of the US state to censor the Epstein files and try and avoid it at all costs. So that's very important to remember, and quite an important bit of context. But okay, so as with most things that Donald Trump does, they're going to disrupt the global world order. He does them on a Friday night, Saturday morning, so that the markets can digest them before Monday market open. So on the 28th of February, which was Saturday, strikes and outbreak of war is the first stage, whereby Donald Trump's United States-led with Israel launched a joint airstrike and missile attack deep into Iran, targeting military bases and nuclear-related infrastructure. On that same day, Donald Trump announces that the start of a major combat operation has begun against Iran's regime, and the first attacks led to the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, and who is the 86-year-old supreme leader of Iran, and his son-in-law and other representatives of the IRCG, which is basically the Iranian military leadership. Trump announced initially that there was then a speech broadcast from Ayatollah Khamenei, so there was some dispute around whether he'd actually been killed. But then later on, there was 40 days of mourning announced by the Iranian government to basically confirm that Khamenei had been killed. The immediate response by Iran, people would have seen all over social media, has been swift and also been widespread. They've attacked various different states within West Asia and the Gulf states specifically that are home to US military bases and Israel itself. So we've seen attacks, even just today, attacks on Tel Aviv, bypassing the Iron Dome, attacks in Abu Dhabi, attacks in Dubai, attacks in Bahrain, attacks in all the way to Cyprus now. They're aiming at RAF Akrotiri, which was the UK base that was used by Britain to fly spy planes over Gaza. People might remember Keir Starmer speaking to troops at RAF Akrotiri saying, no one can know what you do here. So any base that Iran sees as aiding and abetting the US war machine in its preemptive attack on Iran, they are attacking at this point. They've also closed the Strait of Hormuz, which is the thin sliver of water between off the coast of the UAE and between Iran, whereby so much of the world's oil flows through it. Okay. The initial impact of this has been, also worth bearing in mind, there's also been a ground invasion by Israel today, on Tuesday, into southern Lebanon to attack Hezbollah forces who are seen as aligned with Iran. The impact of this, one of the major impacts has been gas prices have gone up by double in the UK because of the Strait of Hormuz closing, and there's been widespread demands for nuclear proliferation. So we've seen France, Macron, in quite sort of nationalistic fashion, with the singing of like the national anthem, say that we're going to be enriching our nuclear arsenal, we're going to be re-empowering our nuclear base, and we're going to be developing more warheads.
And they're not going to tell anyone about it as well. How many?
Yeah, they've also said they're not going to tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
Today, this week in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that they didn't play a role in the US-Israeli strikes, but they would allow the US to use their air bases for defensive measures. The problem is, what is perceived as defensive by the US is preemptive now. So in international law, you have to show verified evidence of an imminent attack. Donald Trump has admitted, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has admitted that there was no imminent attack. And even the Omani diplomats made clear that there was all signs pointing towards a more peaceful settlement. But Donald Trump has said, and even there was a weird quote from Marco Rubio where he's basically saying, the fact that we knew that Iran would respond to us firing missiles at them
is therefore why they had to do it.
Is why we had to do it. So entirely preemptive. I think there's a lot that we're going to draw out in the discussion as we talk more, and there's more things and there's more outcomes from this. But Louisa, I just want to get your first reactions over the weekend as you saw this unfolding.
Yeah, I think obviously two things can be true at the same time, and that's what's going on here. I've seen a lot of things on social media around like Iranians saying that they're happy about this. To me, it's like a very similar situation that's happened in Venezuela, isn't it? Okay, we're free from an oppressive government. If you can even call it a government, but that doesn't mean that this is a freedom from oppression. When has the US ever come to save anyone? And this is very much like the white savior narrative of the West is here once again to save you from yourselves, and it's just very kind of, I don't know, the narrative around
it's quite sinister, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and we've seen it before.
And you know what? The Stars Dem are going to treat me like a broken record, because you know my favorite phrase is always meta narratives. Yeah? Like the narrative in which like this is playing a bigger part in the sort of Western American psyche, especially because at the forefront of this, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, I believe his name is, he said this, and I quote, "Regimes that believe in Islamic prophetic illusions cannot possess nuclear weapons." And actually for him, right, as this particular individual, what people are not really going to get, and even the Western mainstream media, is the theological importance of this. The fact that, like, in his own mind, and the people at the helm of the American regime, if you want to call it that, they see this very much as a sort of quelling of Islamic extremism, but a triumph over some sort of like degenerate form of Christianity as well. And in the same ways that we critique, or maybe a lot of people want to critique the Iranian regime, so the Ayatollah, etc., for basing their whole sort of, I guess, political legitimacy off some sort of theology. Yeah. What we're seeing from leading figures in the American government is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, it's this idea that there's some sort of divinity there's around the West. Reason. Yeah, and this like whiteness that's come to save everybody once again. You're so right.
And even just from a pure legality perspective, like within the US Constitution, the president can only begin a war or commit the country to war as an executive decision if there is an imminent threat. So it's like kind of a speed-based thing. Yeah. But the Pentagon today has said that there was no imminent attack. So internationally, it's not legal, but also he should have had to go to Congress to pursue this war against Iran.
And if you unpack that a bit more, the implication was literally that Israel strong-armed America into doing this. So you just have the Epstein files that are released. You have a lot of dodgy connections to Israel. You have a lot of dodgy connections to Mossad. And then now all of a sudden, just because that there was some sort of perceived threat, and then Israel were going to go do something, America had to do something first.
Yes, that's the words absurd. Of like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that he basically says the likelihood of an Israeli attack forced their hand. So bonkers stuff in that sense. I want to get kind of a bit philosophical with it, maybe we'll say, because I want to kind of draw a distinction between the Venezuela example and the Iran example, because it seems like Trump is kind of pursuing, clear as A to C now, just purely realpolitik and sort of profit maximizing and trying to solidify US interests around the world. So now it becomes a lot clearer why Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was seized and the oil reserves of Venezuela put under US control, because now obviously the Strait of Hormuz has been closed and the global oil supply is being starved, but the US has access to Venezuelan oil. But I want to sort of sound the alarm. There's going to be very different to what happened in Venezuela. The theological underpinnings of the Iranian Islamic regime are far different to the sort of nationalism of Venezuela. We're seeing already in Iran, although there was a lot of dissent over the past decades to the Ayatollah's regime, a sort of coalescing around this martyrdom from people that were previously dissidents. So we're seeing like people attending streets, sort of streets being filled around Iran of people sort of rising up arms and saying death to America. We're also seeing similar scenes in Lahore, where there was the attack on the US consulate. Even in Nigeria, Shia communities in Nigeria, Afghanistan, Iraq, even obviously in Lebanon as well. So I think what we're going to see here, and there's been a lot of commentators as well saying this, there's going to be fundamentally different from any other US intervention because of the theological underpinnings and the worldview. A lot of these people would rather be martyred.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, so the thing about Shia Islam in particular is that Shia Islam is a branch of Islam that is born quite literally out of suffering and martyrdom.
Right.
So after the Prophet Muhammad passed away, there was big sort of civil wars in like the kind of Islamic early caliphs, early societies. And not to even get into the nitty gritty, but the two main figures, right? Ali and Hussein, these big sort of figures in theological importance to Shias, both drastically killed, both sort of very tragically killed. And so for Shia Muslims, that is the kind of memory that basically motivates them to exist in this world. And so the fact that, even if you just talk about some of the facts, right? So the Ayatollah Khamenei, he's a direct descendant of Hussein. He's the spiritual embodiment to a lot of these Shia Muslims across the world of, you know, goodness and divinity. Khamenei himself, right, is the first ever supreme leader to be martyred. Yeah, he's killed in Ramadan, the most blessed month, by America, who's regularly referred to as the Great Shaitan, the Great Satan, and he's killed alongside his family, which echoes that same story of how the Battle of Karbala, in which Hussein and his family were also brutally killed. So even if we just kind of just drawing that out just slightly just shows you there was no thinking on the American part that did this, because they thought this was going to be a win. But the reaction from Shia Muslims, not just in Iran, but from across the world, I think it's going to be mad.
The way I want to frame that to you, Louisa, in trying to employ some of your like specific skill set when it comes to the academics of critical theory, is this seems to be a collision, a violent collision of different perspectives, different paradigms, where the US, and what Sean's trying to sort of highlight there, has a fundamental misunderstanding of how this will play out, has a fundamental misunderstanding of how Iranians see the world. How can we rationalize that sort of clash of, I don't even say civilizations, but clash of paradigms?
Well, what's happening is this kind of, I guess, Donald Trump wants to be a hero. This seems to be like a fight between a hero narrative, I suppose. We've got this white savior hero over in the West that, you know, they create this narration all of the time. We've seen it again and again in history. And they change it, you know, to suit whatever situation. We've seen it in like Libya and with Colonel Gaddafi. They will rebrand who the enemy is and who the hero is, and, you know. And it seems in the same kind of way this is happening, but in like a mirror image, in the same way that you're saying this is might get turned into like a heroic thing. And obviously I don't know much about this side of like the theology and things like that, but that's so interesting that, I mean, I'd ask you, what does that mean for like Shia Muslims in the rest of the world? Like, is this going to have a huge impact on that?
The way I could describe it is like the fact that if the Pope just got smoked, Catholics
I think it's worse than that.
No, if the Pope got smoked, Catholics would be livid. Times that by like 10 million.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that this is a direct embodiment of a lineage of just like God, really. And so it is very difficult. I think so we want to understand that clash of different perspectives, but we're interested to hear your thoughts, Louisa, around as well. What really is the intention of like Trump then? Like what was really behind all of this kind of like malicious intent in terms of things that he does.
I think Donald Trump doesn't have any ideology at all. I don't think he's an ideologue.
Interesting.
I don't think he's a fascist. I think the only thing that man believes in is himself. He has nothing else that he wants other than power. And whether it's because of, I don't know, some weird Freudian mum issue that he's had in his past or whatever, his project is about himself, and he will do anything to kind of satisfy that. But, you know, like, interestingly, on this idea, I suppose, like, maybe we can think of it in terms of martyrdom and stuff, but fascism as well is suicidal. Like, it's always about masochism. It's always about this destruction to no end, or... So, and again, it's like, it's about the heroic death all of the time. It's the same. So I think that's kind of interesting that Donald Trump doesn't have a plan, I don't think, after this. He doesn't have a plan in general. This is just about his ego in every space, in every place. So
I think there's even sort of evidence that through Polymarket, there's been insider trading as well.
And I kind of want to touch on sort of both those points, because you know, people on the left are quite indebted to the idea of material interests. We often hear talk around, we need to coalesce around our shared material interests. And I was at I actually went to like a release of Ash Sarkar's book a couple of weeks ago, and she was giving an example of like the Lancashire cotton famine and how people went against their own material interests. But I kind of thought to myself, well, these people, because it was back in like the 1850s, these people are very like devout Christians. So from their perspective, although they're like missing out financially, their material interests, they firmly believe in like heaven and hell and the weight of sin will have upon them on the day of judgment. So they're fully pursuing their material interests. They just have a different understanding of that materiality. And what I think we're seeing here when we see the interactions between, or the rising interactions between, let's sort of like the neoliberal capitalist order and perhaps like the Islamic world, is a misunderstanding or misalignment of materiality. Because for Donald Trump, he can't understand why people don't just want to, you know, flatten Gaza and turn it into luxury resorts because you're going to make money off that. Or why the Ayatollah, when he's totally like pressurized into a corner, wouldn't just flee to Russia with his wealth and let Reza Pahlavi return and become like a puppet leader.
He just stayed in his yard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's because, in my perspective, there's a different, as we said before, paradigm, but a different understanding of what is material. For a lot of the people that are followers of the Islamic regime in Iran, what is material to them would for like an atheistic neoliberal world order is like total nonsense. And I think there's kind of a...
It's not worth it. The payoff matrix is completely different.
Yeah, the payoff matrix, and there's a misunderstanding of the payoff matrix there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess the question I'm putting forward there is like, is there a way to rationalize that? Is there a way to try and piece that apart and step outside of your own mind?
I think really what we're talking about, I guess, is ideology. If you want to think religion is an ideology or like capitalism is an ideology, these are belief systems and they can be hijacked in any kind of way. And this is why, like, I know a lot of people or, you know, critical theorists, political philosophers are like anti-religious in this way because they see this system that is so easily hijacked, but we really need to be aware that power structures can be hijacked in any form. You know, the sort of right-wing nationalism can be rebranded and mutated to fit any, you know, any condition.
Yeah, extremism can manifest in any sort of worldviews, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally see some sort of like mirror parallels between the sort of practical worldview of the Ayatollah Khamenei, the Islamic regime of Iran's worldview, and the sort of worldview of Benjamin Netanyahu. Obviously, they have fundamental difference in their like understandings, but in terms of their practice and how they want to behave and how they want to like expand their power and how they want to sort of consolidate power within their own domestic space, I see quite a lot of similarities there. The idea of like a greater Israel versus the idea of like sort of the Persian or the sort of the
yeah, but it's not
leader of...
It's not really as imperialist though, right? Like the Iranian regime. Obviously, they've backed and they've done quite bad things in like Syria, for example, with the Syrian civil war, and they're quite complicit in that sense.
They have quite totalitarian ideas of sovereignty, though.
But I wouldn't say they're first movers in the same way that maybe Israel are in terms of like aggression, etc.
I understand. I guess maybe that's also the perspective that changed, because like a lot of what Israel would say is that Iran is a first mover in like their support of the Houthi rebels in Yemen and their support of Hezbollah in Lebanon and these sorts of things. So I guess it's like...
But then what was the colonial imposition that happened in the Middle East artificially in 1948?
Okay, obviously I'm on your side of the point, but more I'm talking about like
that's what I'm saying.
In terms of pure actions. And I guess like the point I want to keep coming back to with you, Louisa, is like, it feels so difficult sometimes to step outside of our own worldview. Because I'm sat here in the same way that I'm encouraging Donald Trump to be able to rationalize like the worldview of Ayatollah Khamenei and the Iranians. It's like if we want to be problem solvers, we also need to be able to understand the framework within which Donald Trump is working, the payoff matrix Benjamin Netanyahu perceives.
Yeah. Do you do much studying then of like helping people step out of their own worldview then?
I guess in this situation, I think we need to realise like there are no heroes. You know, there's not going to be a hero that emerges out of this. And that is the whole story of the US, isn't it? The military, that is the story they're told. It's a similar story, I guess, of this like sacrifice. If you go into the military, you sacrifice yourself for this ideological, idea. But in this situation, I don't, nothing like that is going to emerge. There is no sort of payoff in that way.
And what we're seeing as well then, I guess, are two competing forms of nationalisms. And so it'll be helpful because I think like a lot of the stars then would ask us to kind of break down different topics to them. But from Miss Critical Theorist herself, like help us explain and understand like nationalism then. Like what is this? And what are we really seeing here? Because obviously in the West and in America, we're seeing the rise of the far right, which is basically fueling this one branch. Obviously, we kind of already unpacked Islamic nationalism a bit, or the Iranian nationalism. So how would you, because a lot of people have different definitions of it. So I'll be interested to hear how you kind of understand that.
Well, obviously, my PhD's on the rise of nostalgia, and I think nostalgia is everything to do with nationalism. This return to... It's always the fatherland. It's never the motherland. It's always a patriarchal old social order or vision of what has come before and what's created stability. And that's, to me, that's nationalism. It's always a journey of return back to the land. But you can't return anywhere without sort of encountering ghosts. And that's what we're seeing in these like fascist leaders. These people that will take advantage of when we see this... voids of power, they will just be, pure will to power in that situation. I think that's what we're seeing with like Donald Trump and stuff like that. But with, I think British nationalism is quite sinister because it turns this idea or this education of imperialism, the history of imperialism on its head to rebrand it on, not even rebrand it, but gild it into this idea that it's a golden age and we need to go back to some sort of imperial Britain, which is absolutely abhorrent, obviously.
Can I ask then, and this maybe just is like totally trivial, but is there any fundamental difference then? You know when you hear about like Mother Russia? Is there any sort of difference in Russian nationalism there to what Mother Russia and the nationalism there?
I mean, they still... Again, it was probably Freudian. But it's still always, Putin is the head of the state. Like this strongman leader, return to a strongman leader, it always has to be led by a strong man in this situation. So I think, again, it's very, nationalism is always very rooted in patriarchy.
And also, I really like that quote there. It's like, if you're going to return to the past, you're going to encounter ghosts. But do you ever find a nationalism which is about a return to a past state, but that past state did exist? Because sometimes what we find is like, especially in Britain, it's like they're reminiscent about an imagined like past that never actually existed. But is there ever nationalism where it's like you can kind of understand it, and be like, yeah, fair enough, you want to go back to that? Like maybe people talk about want to go back to 2016.
Yeah, I guess like, is it really just always chasing an illusion? Yeah,
nostalgia is always it's not a real idea of the past. It's not history, because if in critical theory we talk about historical materialism, not in the way that you do in terms of Marxism, but historical materialism is understanding history in a way that is about culture and art and as it was, I don't know if you guys know like Walter Benjamin, but he's always very much I think he would call himself a critical theorist, but he was just before critical theory really kicks off or whatever. And he talks about how there is these ruptures in time, he calls it now time, where there is an opportunity for everything to change, but you can't look at that time without looking at all the history of like grabbing onto any scrap of understanding context, understanding how we got there. Like progress is never linear. Progress is never guaranteed. In fact, probably tyranny is more guaranteed than progress.
Definitely.
So there needs to be a moment, there needs to be a means of understanding that now time and using it towards the direction of progress rather than, because it can always go backwards, and that's what is being picked up by fascists now.
So would you be sympathetic to the view then that history just repeats itself then?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, interesting.
I don't think so.
Unpack it a bit then, because I think the reason why that's sort of coming back into our zeitgeist is because we're just seeing a sort of resurgence of these attitudes we thought we overcame once upon a time. But actually now it's seeming like, did we not really learn anything from our history books?
I guess if I build on what you're saying there, if that resurgence is based around a nostalgia for a time that didn't exist,
Exactly.
then in a material sense that
They never
isn't
even
cyclical.
existed.
Yeah.
It feels cyclical because it's like they're nostalgic about something that they're claiming happened, but it never actually happened, sort of thing.
Yeah, but like Marx says, first as history repeats, first as tragedy, then as farce. It never repeats in the same way twice. Or Mark Twain, obviously, it doesn't repeat, it rhymes, things like that. And I think,
No, go ahead.
I think that's more of like a productive way to think of history, because if you tell yourself, right, this is a repetition of the 1930s, that's not productive, because the old ways of combating that are not going to work. We are in a very like technocratic age now. We have nuclear weapons now. This is a completely different space, and a lot of this war is happening. Well, it's proxy wars. It's places in the Middle East. So there's so many things where you need to be so careful in thinking of history repeating, because I think it puts you at like a disadvantage or on the back foot if you think that, this is just a repetition. We can use old ways of solving that.
I guess it can make people quite passive as well and not feel like they're active agents who can kind of...
Yeah, because if you think it's cyclical, you'll also think perhaps this sorts itself out.
Yeah, true.
I think I want to keep picking your brain before we even get back to like stuff. But so you talked about the Walter Benjamin idea of like a rupture in time.
Yeah,
and
it's like my favourite theory.
Okay, lovely. I kind of want to throw someone else in the pot, maybe mix up, come out with something. Arendt's views on violence. Yeah. So Hannah Arendt, when she talks about violence, she questions like the instrumentality of violence as a means for power because it is so volatile.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, obviously it's very like soon after the fact, but we could think about what happened on the weekend as sort of that rupture in time whereby there's like sort of a violent discontinuation in a world order previous to the weekend and after, but in a way that Donald Trump can't control. He thinks he can manage violence to like leverage power, but violence is inherently volatile. So he sort of ruptured. I think what we're going to see is one, obviously, the response from Iran is going to be totally outside of what Donald Trump could have reckoned beforehand, but also, the average person, maybe even in the West, worldview and views on like, the West and Islamic regime, but now I'm kind of perceiving things in a slightly different way. Do you think there's an opportunity for that?
Yeah, so I guess like you think this is kind of more Fanon maybe, where he thinks that, the violence can be used in a way that is, I guess, like accelerating us out of a mess, and this is liberating. But like you saying, Iran would say, well, you can't just set a match off and hope that it will, in a room full of gas, like hope that eventually we can control it. That's not going to happen. So I think really she's probably more correct in this situation, because the conditions that we are in, the geopolitical conditions, are like a literal, factory full of gas here, and you're gonna spark a flame. Like very, very difficult then to control. And like you're saying, people are so connected in a way across like technology and things like that. So this isn't just an isolated incident or an isolated war. This is for everybody all of the time on phones, and so.
Yeah, I think it's also worth bearing in mind, because I want to touch back on more of like the actual facts of what's happened over the weekend before we sort of wrap up on this topic. But it is worth bearing in mind that one of the initial attacks actually landed on a girls' elementary school in Iran,
so sad,
which obviously is a war crime. There's actually disputes around who was at fault, but at the time of recording, it does seem like it was the Israeli-US led missile invasion that was at fault here. So actually, the real human cost of this always needs to be re-centralized. I want to bring up like something that kind of a wormhole went down in like military strategy. So Iran actually initiated what's called the decentralized mosaic defense. I just think that's a great name for a military strategy. I love a mosaic. But
don't give away who you're supporting, yeah? But I need to keep continuing.
But so what this is Iran understands its place in the world as being under threat all the time by its, the devil of the US, as it would perceive it. So in preparation for an event like this, they have set up their military such that at any given point, they can essentially cut the head and continue functioning. So they were prepared for the martyrdom of their leading of their leaders, such that every sort of regional leader has their own access to resources, has their own autonomy, has their own access to weaponry, has their own military bases. So in a way where I maybe think about Venezuela was, somewhat neutralized by the capture of Maduro. Iran is fundamentally different in the fact they were prepared for this and have been able to decentralize quite quickly.
Furthermore, that it shows the difference between how the Ayatollah, it was not just another dictator.
Yeah.
This isn't a vassal state. It's actually a very sort of invested, deeply well-prepared state as well. Some of the best nuclear scientists in the world come from Iran as well.
Yeah.
The other point I want to bring up is there's one guy who is just chilling with a cigar right now, and that is Kim Jong-un. And I think, if we look at Venezuela, if we look at the sort of downstream of Venezuela, which is the strangling of the oil reserves of Cuba, if we think about different, Donald Trump missile attacked Nigeria and all these sort of things, I guess maybe there's a reappraisal now about, and there'll be a reappraisal around the world of any state, even if they feel that maybe friendly or neutral towards the United States, about the pursuance of nuclear weapons. Because one person who stayed sort of scot-free in all of this is the DPRK, is North Korea. And I don't know, I just want to throw that out there to you. It's how, and I guess it kind of touched on our rent point about you really don't understand the implications of the violence you use. Because maybe sort of counterproductively here, Donald Trump has sort of incentivized people to really pursue nuclear armament.
Yeah, and violence isn't what it was when Iran was writing that text. I'm sure if she wrote that text, it would be a completely different text. There wasn't nuclear weapons. Now we can completely destroy everyone within 5 minutes. So it's absolutely terrifying. I think everybody can agree, but I don't know what critical theory has to say about a time where everybody we're in such crisis. It just seems like every single nation is in this suicidal mission to the end. We know it's over. Why don't we just, if we can't have freedom, no one can. Let's just blow everything up. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, an end times nationalism.
You should be the one to write the paper then. Teach us.
I'm busy.
And also pertinent to that
the postdoc.
Pertinent to that example I gave about the nukes that our producers held up on the camera is Libya used to have nuclear weapons, South Africa used to have nuclear weapons, and more importantly, Ukraine used to have the 5th largest nuclear arsenal in the world. I think we're going to wrap up there on Iran.
I think so.
And I'm assuming, I would bet a lot of money, I'm not a gambling man, but we'll probably be talking about it next week.
Yeah.
Stop the show. If you are enjoying this episode and value what Northstar Politics does, please consider supporting us. Head to northstarpolitics.com/support to help us push political imagination. We appreciate you.
A positive story. Before everything kicked off in Iran, there was some good news down the road from you. So in the by-election in Gorton and Denton in Manchester, Hannah Spencer was victorious. Absolute landslide.
Can't I shout out Hannah Spencer?
Big up Hannah Spencer.
We love you, Hannah.
Big up the Green Party. Big up Muffin Ali, who carried out one of the most Zoki...
Auntie-Uncle network.
No. Did you not see him crowd surfing?
Oh, I didn't see that.
You didn't see Muffin Ali crowd surfing? One of the deputy leaders of the Green Party just crowd surfing at the after party. I thought he wasn't going to make it, but he got up there eventually. And
it's the Ramadan spirit, man.
It's the Ramadan spirit. But yeah, so Hannah Spencer received 40.7% of the vote, significantly ahead of her rivals. People in polling was having it at sort of a slither, or maybe Labour is going to be this going to win. Reform UK's candidate Matt Goodwin came second with 28.7% of the vote, and Labour Party's Angeliki Stoglia finished third with 25.4% of the vote. This was a Labour stronghold, and they now lost it to the Greens. And sort of a downstream of this is the Green Party then over the weekend passed over 200,000 members. And in a poll today or yesterday from YouGov and Sky News, they had Reform Party voting intentions for the nationwide. Reform Party number one at 23%, the Greens 21%, Labour at 16%.
Close.
Yeah.
So first of all, thoughts on that? Thoughts on the Green Party's rise? But also we'll get into the Labour story as well after.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
I was quite, you say optimist of the world, pessimist of the intellect, don't you? And that's really where I was going into this Green Party election. I'm proud of us Manx, we chose the right one. But she did so well. This wasn't close. This was 4,000 votes more than Reform. And obviously it's worrying that Reform came second and that's maybe what the general election is going to look like. But I do think that is a really positive step. Manchester, if we can do it there, we can do it anywhere. It's Gorton and Denton is majority white working class people, and I think those are the kind of people that need to be pulled away from reform and sort of, taught or told or, like given a different option.
A different narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
And am I right in saying that you're a Green Party member?
Yeah.
Why? Convince the people at home. Why is this the time to actually just be part of the Green Party?
We have no other choice.
Facts.
It's an emergency.
No, but there's got to be like, what about the positive reason though? Like, as to why did you see it as like,
Yeah, that's why people voted for Labour last time. They had no other choice.
Yeah.
So, what made you actually just say, you know what, I need to sign up? Because me and him, we're still just floating.
We're on the transfer market right now.
Innit?
We're.
Well, because
If reform play the higher price, we'll go. But
I'm a Green member because they align with, as close as any the policies could align with my views. I think the biggest crisis we face is the climate crisis. That absolutely needs to be tackled. That we need to do something about that if that's what that should be at the forefront of the next election. It's our future, and their policies are socialist, and I'm a socialist, so.
And one thing I wanted to touch on as well, and bringing it back to sort of this context is quite relevant, is that if nostalgia is the poison, what is the antidote? And in what ways are Greens embodying that?
Well, nostalgia is about the past. We need to think about the future. And I think that's what the Greens are trying to do. It's not about revenge. It's not about taking us back to a better time or a time when things were more stable. It's about creating a new time that is going to be completely different. And I think we're so scared, or maybe we're just unable to imagine a future in the place that we are now within neoliberalism and things like that. And the Greens are offering something different, and we really need to get behind them in that way, I think.
There's something we spoke about a bit when one of our many critiques of the rest is politics. Like it was when Rory Stewart was critiquing like Gary Stevenson and that. And I want to get like your specific thoughts on this with your expertise on like nostalgia, nationalism, these sort of things. Is most of the institutions we have today that bestow credibility were inherently made in the past. For them to be here now, they were made in the past. Yeah. So they are imbued, and their metrics for credibility and success are imbued with history, with nostalgia, such that the decision makers that are valid in present time are those that are imbued with the ideas of the past. And you see this inherently small C conservative. You see this a lot of the discourse from whatever previous New Labour leader it would be. This currently Ed Balls, whoever it is, that's on the Talking Head shows. Is they'll say, well, no, we can't use this idea because the authority, the OBR, this person, Mark Carney, whoever it is more in favour of this idea. You don't have the requisite credentials to do that. What's your thoughts on that kind of interplay of nostalgia there, whereby these new ideas which the Green Party is trying to put forward are constantly undercut because, we've never done this before?
Well, we need the system we have isn't working. We need something new. We need to try new. And if they fail, they fail. But we have a failing system. We have a system that already failed, that's failed again and again in 2008, in 1982 or whatever the last crash was. So we need a system that is completely new. And if that means completely, I think we don't need a reform. We need a change. Like, we need a complete overhaul, a complete change of what we have. And the ability and the freedom to imagine that is where we need to start, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'll direct the Stars Dem to our Northstar Politics Substack. We wrote a piece called Soundtrack to Collapse, whereby you just get these, in Britain especially, you just get these people all the time. Keir Starmer is like obviously the archetype of this, who like everyone can see everything, everyone can see the world decaying around them, and he just gets up there with his overly nasally voice saying, no, it's okay, we can keep on doing things that we've always been doing them. We don't need a radical change. But I think, the events of the weekend are just making it clearer and clearer to people that, radical problems require radical redress.
But one open question I have to the floor then is that I feel like when you are on
such a debater.
No.
The floor.
No, just the floor. Yeah. But is that okay? We're all on this sort of side of like moving forward, positivity, hope, etc. And then I think in the roots to that, it doesn't seem like there is a sort of space for, I don't know, tradition anymore, or the accumulated wisdom of people that come from, like, our forefathers, etc.
It is the West Indian side of him.
Yeah. No, but it's real, because I think like a lot of minority communities do sort of actually hold those values true to their heart. So to what extent then, I guess, do we navigate people's actual, I guess, value for tradition and perhaps a bit more old school values when we're trying to sell them a vision that actually, things need to change. We need like an overhaul.
That's a good question.
I love that question. And we talk about this, we talk about this quite a lot in like theory and philosophy. And what we are struggling with is, and what nostalgia is a reaction to, is the inability to narrate our times, to tell a story. And that's what tradition gives you, isn't it? It's you are part of a story. And nostalgia is so appealing because it makes you part of a story. It creates community. So I think there absolutely should be space for tradition. The tradition of the left is one of struggle. And we need to remember them and not be nostalgic about them in a way that, like you said, it's not real. Our struggle has been real, and everything we have now is because people have refused to accept the oppression that they were given by leaders previously. So I think the tradition of the left needs to continue because it's one of struggle, it's one of overthrowing oppression, and that's okay. Like, it's when tradition is, again, like ideology, hijacked in a way that is about oppressing other people and going back to old social orders that are oppressive, and just always understanding that we have to be on the side of the oppressed and not on the side of the oppressor, and understand where that power sort of manifests.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And we're honestly so bad at advertising, but we were meant to say at the start of the show, we had like an audio exclusive podcast on the weekend, Question Time. First of its kind, Northstar Politics Question Time, where we answered some questions from the Stars Dem at home. And one of them, which I just came to mind when you were discussing that, was about Black British identity and like Muslim British identity. And the advice I tried to give was sort of around, it is important to identify with certain characteristics you are going to be housed into by society, but you don't want to do it by buying into how they've been created before you necessarily, because oftentimes these have been created through oppression. So I think that sort of articulation you gave there of how to intermingle,
so reclaiming it as well.
Yeah, how to intermingle tradition with innovation is like abundantly important for a lot of oppressed people trying to find their identity for themselves beyond oppression. Because a lot of these labels have been born out of oppression. Even the idea for women.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I was just thinking, that's what it was making me think of. Like, it's so political, but it's also a personal thing. Like, I think, I would quite like to get married, even though that's not praxis. If I'm getting, believing in the institution of marriage and all the rest of it, but there should be space for that. And what Hannah Arendt actually was quite in favour of is there being a very strong separation between this kind of life that you lead that doesn't have to be so overtly hyper-political all of the time, that you can withdraw and that you can, sort of settle into a space that feels not alienated. And that's what we want. And I think we do live in a time now that is so hyper-political. You can't escape. Like we were saying over the weekend, I actually try my best to manage how much information that I am taking on. But when we have such a bombardment of politics, of information, of news all of the time, I think people do find it really difficult. And when you don't have a means of managing that and withdrawing, especially when work is so difficult, we are constantly working, we're told to optimize, be productive. There is no space really for us to just feel safe. And then obviously you get like the wellness industry booming, and you get, these sort of the reactions to that, and nostalgia. And I think we need to find, different spaces. And
safety can't be found in stillness, has to be found in consumption, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's created.
That's narrative.
Yeah, because we do like brain rot, don't we? Like scrolling, doom scrolling. That's what we do to relax.
Yeah.
You haven't seen his FYP.
King of brain rot. I only follow Sean Ramis on TikTok, so I guess maybe. But around here at Northstar Towers, we call that financial totalitarianism. The idea that we're not even going to have the capacity to take stillness or think about politics because we are pushed to the wire by our jobs, by rent, by all these sorts of things. But one thing I would say is, like, just as a rule of thumb, a lot of times, if you're experiencing that, like, political angst or whatever it might be, which is so natural with the overload of information we have, a lot of times that can be somewhat resolved by creating or action. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and change the world, like, on day one.
Yeah.
It's literally just maybe through discussion with family, with friends about what's going on to express your feelings, because you are creating ideas in that practice.
We actually have, like, in critical theory, this guy, love him, another favourite theorist of mine, Herbert Marcuse. Have you guys heard
of course. Socialist, right?
Yeah. And he talks about this. So he's, like, Freudian, in that he's derived his ideas from Freud. And he talks about how there's this, like, repressed desublimation, which isn't a very sexy term at all. But what he's saying is that capitalism doesn't give you any freedom. It gives you an illusion of freedom. It gives you a freedom to choose what, I don't know, car you want to get on finance or like what ice cream you want to buy at the shop. It doesn't really give you freedom, but...
You can't not buy a car in a lot of places.
Well...
If you know what I mean, exactly the example, you can choose which like Chevy or Mustang you want, but you can't not have a car in certain cities in America, let's say.
Well, yeah, but it's more like, okay, so you can choose what IKEA furniture you want, but you can't choose socialism.
Got you.
Yeah.
You can't choose like to not work.
You
can't choose to leave.
Yeah.
So that sort of built up repression, it gets managed through this illusion of choice, gets managed through different, it's kind of like letting off a fuse, I guess. Okay. And when that oppression builds up to the point where it's so, you can't contain it anymore, then it becomes either... it becomes part of the death drive. So the death drive is destruction and self-destruction. Okay. So if you've ever watched Fight Club, that's what happens to him. That's what happens to him. Yeah. So he obviously...
He cops all the IKEA furniture and then...
It's like...
his life's going to be fulfilled from that.
Yeah, and it isn't. So he becomes destructive or self-destructive. But that Fight Club is also what happens with fascism. Fascism becomes the Fight Club, or the scapegoats become the people of colour or whatever, marginalised group. That's where the death drive is sort of, channeled.
Even before it's inwards.
Yeah, or it's obviously self-destructive, and you see this in like suicides, especially male suicides, where they believe that that it is their fault, and like that's what Thatcher created. It's like the entrepreneurial society.
That is very powerful, especially with obviously the rise of male suicide. I think even just to circle back to the Green Party before we head to the back roads, you might be interested, in our interview with Zach Polanski, he mentioned he used to practice...
you did one with Zach Polanski?
Come on now.
Yeah. He mentioned that early in his youth, he was part of the Theatre of the Oppressed.
Yes, I teach that.
Exactly, a downstream from Paulo Freire, but that kind of is an embodiment of the practice we were talking about, of like practicing the creation of ideas as a resolution or a balm to that anxiety you might be feeling.
So what Marcuse says is that the other side of the death drive, so where you put this alienation, where you put this repression, you can also make it into art, and that's called the life drive. Okay. And generally, women are really good at this. They go and talk. If you have this in a relationship, you feel really like, he's really stressing me out. He's not done the laundry again, blah, blah, blah. That repression, like, I can't leave this relationship, but it's really... like pissing me off, then women will go out and have a few drinks with the girls and talk about it and release that, and everything will be fine, and then they can go home and like it's not this like pent up anger. And I think because men often don't have that outlet in which to do that, and the outlets that they have had, like communities, like football, stuff like that, where you
for the
I think, I don't know, that there does need to be more spaces to be productive with these feelings of repression that capitalism obviously inflicts upon all of us.
That's a beautiful roundabout way of answering your question. Why to vote for Greens? That was honestly jam-packed state of play. I've appreciated so much your insight you've given.
Schooling the Northstar boys.
We
love it when it happens.
You are. I've learned more than you have of me. Trust me.
Ours is just random facts. Yeah. You're giving us real insight. But we'll leave it there for the state of play and get some brief stories from the back roads.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
All right, welcome back to the back rows. These are just quick, brief headlines, which you probably didn't hear about because obviously the world's about to go to war. So actually quickly on the Iran one, there's ChatGPT is being used to basically commit humanitarian war crimes, right? And everyone just needs to delete this app. So let me just explain what happened. So leading up to the invasion in Iran, right? OpenAI signed an agreement for the US Pentagon to provide AI for classified military operations, okay? And that deal came after Anthropic, which is OpenAI's rival, was blacklisted by the Trump administration for refusing to allow its AI to be used for two purposes. One, fully autonomous weapons, and two, mass surveillance. So Anthropic were like, nah, we're going to turn down this $200 million contract. And so Sam Altman, Mr. ChatGPT himself, swooped in, got the contract. Then the day after, they went to war in Iran. Now, AI is just the big buzz right now. Quick thoughts. How are we feeling about AI? Are we using ChatGPT? We better not be. We better be deleting it.
My only thing to say is people remember there was a time when OpenAI was not for profit. It was it's your charity.
Yeah.
That's my only thing I want to keep people aware of.
What's your relationship like to AI? Because
Especially in academia, yeah.
So
Yeah, it's very, very easy to detect. And also, it's rubbish. If it was any good at anything, I would be like, yeah, use it. But it's so poor. It doesn't understand anything. If I could get it to mark essays, well, great, but it doesn't. It's unable to understand.
Sounds like you tried, but
No.
No, I'm there where it's like, I'll openly admit, like, I don't use AI, not for, like, well, obviously there's ethical concerns, but beyond that is, like, my elitist concerns. Like, I don't think this can write well. I don't think this can do a
No,
job
it's
well.
so
write well.
bad. It can't understand anything. It can't write anything because it can't understand it. The way that we talk about it like it's a human, we shouldn't talk about it. It doesn't hallucinate. It's just wrong.
Yeah, facts. And then another insidious story is that FIFA are actually helping the Trump administration, I guess, sanitize their whole public relations. So FIFA is pledging $65 million plus for Gaza football infrastructure, including a 25,000-seat national stadium, a training academy, and 55 pitches across Gaza. And so the funds will form part of a $7 billion Gaza relief package announced by Trump at the Border Peace meeting on February 19th. FIFA President Gianni Infantino says that football will rebuild people, emotion, hope, and trust. And it just feels so like discongruent.
It's worth bearing in mind there was more teams than this and more pitches in Gaza before Israel wiped it to raise it to the ground.
And the question is, while Gaza is still basically burning and Palestinians are literally recovering dead bodies from housing, FIFA wants to just polish their image with a 50 million vanity project.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I actually had an interesting lunch with one of the Stars Dem, Patrick, who he does a lot of football talk. Very cool guy, and I'm maybe this will be a discussion for later down the line when I fully thought out of my head. But I'm not sure about this FIFA World Cup this summer. I might not watch it. I might just, I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's hard because obviously, like a lot of the kind of culture, the one time England comes together is through this moment.
It's in the US. Iran are meant to be playing.
Really?
Yeah, ICE agents are like all over the place. It's getting to the point now where I guess it comes back to like the critical theory aspect where it's like, do we even have the cognitive space to be objective about these?
Is anywhere free from politics and should it be? Kind of thing?
Also, do we have like the objective ability to reflect on what the US is doing in the same way that we would do if this was China?
Exactly. Or Russia. Exactly. Russia's not allowed to be in Eurovision and all the rest of it. So why?
It's bonkers.
Why this?
Yeah, I don't know. Stars Dem, let us know. Should we be watching it? Who knows? Yeah,
I wanted to say as well, because maybe I'll handle the next one, because I wanted to situate it in opposition to something.
Yeah, go on.
So we spoke a bit about we were speaking about this off camera, crying about it off camera. The Plan 2 student loans. We spoke about it before and how they're just like, they're tied to inflation, but they're horrible. It's basically a 9% extra tax on people that weren't rich enough to be paid their way through uni.
Quick one though, what's your student loan saying?
It's
mad.
Like 99,000 something or other.
You actually have to laugh when you cry.
It's
actually so bad.
My thing, I'm just going to outlive it. That's my
yeah, joke's on you. Joke's on you, SL, whatever it's called, Student Finance England.
But obviously, like, we're struggling to get pay for our student loans. But luckily, the MPs in Parliament have voted for themselves to have a 5% pay rise.
Thank God.
And it's like, you know what it is? I'm actually not against this because I'm for workers getting pay rises. But like, can we just get this across the board? Like, can we just make this across the board?
Can we all have a 5%?
Yeah, I think as well. Last story for the Backroads, which literally just breaking news today, broken by Rivka Brown from Navarre Media. Really good research from her. But it's the UK government's Foreign Office gave £90,000 to fund an Israeli report that described sexual violence on October 7th as systematic and premeditated. So you remember a lot of the narrative post October 7th was like, they were like killing babies and they were raping women and all these sorts of things. It's like the UK government has literally, in a way, to like gloss over or sugarcoat their own complicity in these war crimes and in this genocide, have funded media teams that will try and make this more accepttable, will try and make this more reasonable to people.
Yeah, because I think it's quite clear that the UN obviously has concluded that there was sexual violence on October 7th, but not to trivialize it, but sexual violence happens like all the time in these sort of situations. But that claim of saying it's premeditated
and systematic,
and these sorts of things, as if it was like a tactic of these Hamas like members, even though, by the way, there's so many different types of groups who broke into.
And look at what as well, like the Israelis have done in terms of sexual violence.
Right. But it's also like, is this even something the UK government should be? The UK government should be involved anyway. Exactly. In like producing media reports and trying to tarnish the image of different institutions. Let's just report the objective.
But it's not even tarnishing; it's dehumanizing.
Fact.
That's exactly what they're trying to do. And the fact that even now, 2 years after the fact, they're still trying to do this, bro. David
Lammy,
bro. All right, who do you hate? Not hate.
Hey,
Hate
yeah,
is strong
you know,
word. Strong word. Sorry.
But just like thoughts on David Lammy.
No, not even David Lammy. All right, who's your worst politician right now?
You can't say the Ayatollah because he's dead.
In the UK.
In the UK,
Yeah,
I mean, Keir Starmer.
Kid starver.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not okay with him either. Also, just like a bad speaker.
We get boring.
Bad vibes.
You know.
Because sometimes you don't have to go too deep into just the bad vibes. You're not moving me.
No, just, I don't know, is there a person in there? And, you know,
Yeah.
like, sometimes I do see him on podcasts and he's talking about something human, and I think, oh my God,
I
he's
like
human.
the Arsenal.
But, yeah, but then it's...
Yeah, well, bare nasal. Can I ask you a question, though?
Yeah.
As a Mancunian, thoughts on Andy Burnham?
I like Andy Burnham. I liked Andy Burnham. I think that... I mean, I spoke to Andy Burnham, I met him, and I was like, what do you think of world taxes?
No, he met you.
Oh, yeah, sorry,
word.
yeah. And I think he was probably... If the progressives and Labour were going to unify and we were going to have this, like, unified left, it would have to have been Andy
And
Burnham.
also, just put it out there, obviously, big up Hannah Spencer.
Yeah.
Andy Burnham would have won that election if he
I
was
know,
allowed to stand.
he would have done, yeah.
So, like, it's just brilliant strategic mastery from Keir Starmer there.
Yeah.
But also, do you know what Caribbean people call Andy Burnham? Andy Bundem. Okay, landed a little bit.
A bit.
Right, gosh. We'll leave the backwards there, and you've got to let me land for us, I believe.
You do.
Okay. Yes.
All right, let's get into that.
Critical theory is the most important subject you need to be learning right now.
Honestly, who are we to argue? Got us, landed.
But then, yeah, just recap then. Critical theory, define it.
It is the challenging of power structures and systemic.
And not to act stupid, but how do we actually differ from philosophy? Like, what's the difference between critical theory and philosophy?
Well, I think philosophy asks fundamental questions, doesn't it? It asks how and why. And critical theory is very specific in its direction and its purpose. It's all about emancipation. It's about liberation.
Okay.
It's kind of philosophy with a conscience.
With
maybe.
like an end to it. It's not like philosophy for the sake of it.
Yeah, it's
talking
not
about
philosophy.
you
That's
exist and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's how I think critical theorists would differentiate themselves from philosophers. We argue towards a point which is about liberating people, whereas philosophers just love to argue, I think.
Real. We've got a philosopher over here. Could I ask a couple of questions then? So one, just a basic one of just definitions is what should we understand the power structure to be? And the second one was, could you give an example of like critical theory in functioning?
Yeah, so I guess I can answer that in the same question because critical theory happens everywhere. You see it everywhere all of the time. You just don't have the language for it. So I think what critical theory as a discipline does, and what Paulo Freire has also done, is given us a way of naming power and power structures. If I always think about it in terms of like Kafka, if you've ever read Kafka, like Kafka-esque, this strange structural invisible power system that you can only really see in strange little manifestations and bubbles of, I don't know, an argument or a conversation with friends. You see these power dynamics play out all the time, but you just don't have a means of like putting something like under the microscope and saying, look, this is what it's called. So to me, that's what critical theory does. It gives you multiple lenses, and you can agree, you can disagree with some people and lean more on the side of others, but it's just about critical thinking. It's just about asking the right questions and not necessarily focusing on the answer, but focusing on what is the most emancipatory, liberatory way of constructing new ideas.
Okay.
Interesting.
We don't have to do any more like surface level stuff. Could we just try
learn
from our teacher?
Yeah, go.
Okay,
go.
So someone like Foucault would say that your literal subjectivity is created by the power structures you are sort of molded by the power structures that exist. How then can that same subjectivity have the reflexiveness or the reflectiveness, to analyze these power structures?
Well, I think Foucault obviously has he's a really important figure in critical theory and stuff. And
weird guy though.
Yeah, he is a bit weird. I think the reflective thing is understanding that that panopticon kind of system that he thinks of, this domination that happens outside, also happens inwards. And psychoanalysis also helps with that. I think to marry together different theories allows you to look at lenses beyond necessarily this one place where you can see power, or this is another place you can see power. Like, it's psychoanalytical, it might be philosophical in some ways, and it can also be kind of, I don't know what you'd call Foucault's, I mean, this like post-structuralist or all this kind of idea.
And so if the goal of critical theory then is to understand emancipation and liberation, I'm quite interested in, again, just teaching the man them, just the sort of critical theory understanding of freedom. So Isaiah Berlin talks about two theories of freedom: negative freedom, positive freedom. And I suppose it can be some sort of like spectrum. Like, negative freedom is just freedom from any interference, right? So that's a sort of like a liberal understanding of freedom. Freedom from, right? But then obviously positive freedom is around freedom to do.
Fulfillment, even towards that fulfillment and flourishing.
And sort of like self-realization. So where does critical theory sort of land on that? Where do we come?
Again, that's such like a philosopher question. Because like we don't get so wound up in the semantics and linguistics of what is the idea of freedom. What critical theory aims to do is find how the oppression is manifesting, who is oppressed, and, you know, a means of understanding that oppression beyond kind of the day-to-day realities, or maybe beyond bringing something small to something big, or big to something small, I guess. So it's, rather than think of it as freedom to or from, critical thinking is free within, I guess, the means of thinking itself. So the critical thinking is where it starts for freedom. And you have to also understand where the freedom lies through where the power structures also lie, and kind of, I don't know, liberating people from the power structure. So rather than thinking it is like a personal thing, how you can always be on this side of the oppressed.
So is it kind of an awakening rather than a directed like end? So kind of an awakening to the power structures that you are subjected to, and then beyond that, perhaps you can start philosophizing around your ideal goals beyond that.
I think it's not necessarily about the self. It's not about, this is something I need to liberate myself to become, or, you know, this isn't a project of the self. This is a project for other people generally. And yes, you can be you can be the oppressed individual in this situation.
Oh no, I don't mean an awakening in terms of like a personal like revelation.
Yeah.
More just like allowing people to actually become aware of the systems within
which critical consciousness. So that's kind of the aim with critical theory, I think, is to create this critical consciousness that like Marx talks about. I think Marx and people like that assume that people will just have critical consciousness when they experience struggle and oppression, but you don't. You need a language to name that oppression, to name what's happening.
So is that when perhaps Gramsci comes into play?
Gramsci,
Mispronounce the name.
Oh, don't mispronounce names on the internet. I have made that mistake.
Because obviously he comes and tries to correct that. From
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and that's where I sit more with Gramsci to say that.
Yeah, unpack his ideas as well.
So he thinks that. So obviously, if we start with Marx believes that history is the history of class struggle. That if people are struggling, then history will happen because people will rise up if they are struggling.
It's inevitable.
There's a sort of inevitability about it. And we will eventually reach the utopian socialism and all the rest of it. I'm still waiting for that to happen.
Anytime now.
I know, come on, Mark.
This thing called communism.
I know, please. So what Gramsci says is that's not what's going to happen. You need to give people a language. You need to change people's minds before you can change people's material reality, or allow them to realize that their material reality is oppression. You know, so it's about realizing your own oppression a lot of the time, and doing that through culture. So that could be through art, through, I don't know, any kind of cultural manifestation.
You need a counterculture to this hegemony, the capitalist
hegemony. And shifting the cultural hegemony. I mean, now we talk a lot about the Overton window. The Overton window is kind of a similar idea, what ideas are acceptable, and shifting that parameter to a place that is, more towards progress, I guess. And what Gramsci was worried about was that void that, I mean, obviously in the 1930s, there was such a wide Overton window. We have socialists and we have fascists. And he says, obviously, this is the time for monsters when there is that struggle. If you don't have a means or a vision of the future, then you will get these morbid symptoms like Hitler.
No, could I ask then? Because obviously me and Sean are literally just nodding at the moment, just agreeing with you. But let me push you to maybe, for the Stars Dem at home, explain to them how they might employ more consciously critical theory in their day-to-day life, in their practice.
All you got to do, it's so easy, is just keep asking why.
Okay.
Keep asking yourself. Do not take anything at face value. That is the whole point of critical theory. Is that?
Could you give an example of like a path they might go down? Where could they even start, and where might you expect them to end?
I mean, in people's relationships, you have to employ critical thinking all of the time.
Facts.
Because if somebody says something like, I don't know, that's offended you. Let me think of an argument maybe I've recently had.
Oh, you talk about relationships just generally, not like.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of an example.
Alistair Campbell's got some stuff on relationships.
You were quick to say facts.
You are.
Yeah.
But you're thinking about social relationships.
That's where it's so easy. Yeah, I think that's where we can employ it like more generally, is when something comes up where you think that's not quite right, or that feels like there is something behind that I don't quite understand.
I've got one for you. Cause I saw you talk about it a little bit online. But obviously I'm a supporter of the greatest football team on earth, Manchester United.
Yeah.
And I'm just a big fan of like a lot of our past players, Ji-Sung Park, Three Lung Park from South Korea, Dimitar Berbatov, my favorite player ever from Bulgaria, Patrice Evra from France. And I saw like one of the minority owners, we don't call him Sir, we just call him Jimmy Ratcliffe, come out and basically say that the UK is being colonized by migrants. Yeah. Why, when I begin my stage of saying, so why is this guy talking about that? Mm-hmm. Where could I go from there?
Yeah.
Why is the owner of like a pharmaceutical franchise and Manchester United talking about immigrants taking over the United Kingdom when he lives in Monaco?
Yeah. Well, so there you would start with the language. Okay. What is colonialism? A lot of people, I think, when people say colonization, we don't understand necessarily how loaded that term is unless you've studied it, probably. So really understanding what that means to people, what that using that kind of language, what the history is, because using it in that way removes the historical background to that word, which is obviously abhorrent, like it's horrendous what colonialism is about. And people, this historical amnesia is really what I can see is happening there. Okay. So yeah, start with the language, maybe start with what that language feels like, and then why does that language feel like that? And then even with when people say immigrants, that they're a migrant. There is something very sinister.
When I was doing like geography, I was thinking, so why do we still call them immigrants? Isn't that like domestic?
Yeah, and there's something like they're imposing. There's something that's coming into my space. So I think maybe one way would start with the language and then begin to ask, who is this guy? What is this guy's agenda? Why would this guy want to say something like that? And where you position yourself as well, then turn it reflexively on yourself in reflection, and how you are able to understand what is being said by this white rich man from Monaco.
I guess like the motivation to start questioning always just starts from a feeling as well.
Always, yeah.
Because like you just start with this is weird.
Yeah.
Why is he saying that?
Yeah, it is just
and
a feeling.
You can even feel just offended sometimes. Be like, why do I feel like that?
Yeah.
So it's very much in tune. It's not, again, I guess because the philosophy is very abstract. You feel like you think at like a different level. You have to abstract emotion.
No, it's
critical theory.
And also, we're anti-empiricists here. It's go with the vibes, isn't it? Like phenomenological feelings all the time.
Yeah, but that's what critical theory is. It's just breaking down the things that we see all of the time. We know these things are going on. Critical theory just gives you a language to describe them, and then once you in line with Paulo Freire, when you have a language to describe them, then you can begin to dismantle them.
And I have a question that might be a good end question, unless you have.
No.
So where do people start then? Let's say.
Well, that was gonna be my question.
So one of the stars them at home is just like, okay, I want to become a critical theorist. How do you start?
Well, I just want to engage with it. It doesn't have to. It could be a book, whatever it could be.
Obviously, follow Louisa Munch theory on every platform.
They should have been done that. Should have done that at the start.
I think how I started with critical theory, it wasn't through critical theorists, it wasn't through philosophy or anything that feels quite highbrow, whatever. It was just through reading fiction. It was through reading 1984.
Real.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah.
So it's just realizing that there is something not quite right.
I mean, even the Kafka plays you reference.
Exactly.
Like, I remember being young, going to see Kafka at the Young Vic, and I was like, rah, like this actually moved me. Like,
Yeah.
my mum just forced me to come watch this, but I'm going away thinking like, prah.
The easiest way to do critical thinking is just when you're watching a film or you're doing something that is asking you to think critically, that is asking you to question how you see reality. And with the theatre of the oppressed, with theatre of cruelty, all that kind of thing, that's exactly what Zach Polanski, I guess, is also kind of in line with.
Definitely.
But it's making, even especially horror films. Horror films are so good at making this like strangeness into something crystallized, tangible that you can understand, break down, write about if you want in an essay. But yeah, it's
Obviously,
Lost me there.
I would have been lying.
Yeah, you lost me. You know me, I can't watch none of that.
Them
I've
demons
literally never seen a horror,
bumping
never
you.
seen a
No,
horror film in my life.
it's easier to watch it if you think this is research for.
But I just get scared. Like, I just never watched a horror film. But I feel
Really?
like, yeah, none.
No, I used
honestly,
to
no
watch
need.
it with a man them, innit?
No, for me, if people try to suggest it, no need to watch that kind of
maybe not
scary
horror
stuff.
then.
But
Maybe
even like, I feel like, 1984.
maybe absurd. Maybe, push
the
it out a little bit.
I mean, definitely, but like 1984, brilliant recommendation. Even
Yeah.
like Kafka, like with the trial or something like that.
Yes.
Brilliant recommendations. If there was someone out there who's like, no, but I want to read. I'm a nerd. I want to read.
Okay, I want to go.
I want to read a book. I want to read a theorist.
Yeah.
What could you recommend?
Mark Fisher. Every time, Mark
come
Fisher.
on now.
Capitalist realism.
Yeah.
That's where I started.
Okay.
Always. And Zero Books as well. He started Zero Books, which is like a publishing house. They do really, really short books that just introduce the normal, not necessarily academic reader to critical theories and philosophies. And they're so interesting. Definitely recommend, really cheap as well. So really small
Nice.
books.
That's real, man. Obviously, when you write a book one day.
Yeah, you got to write a book someday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Lovely stuff.
it might be coming.
Right. That felt like, honestly, when it's me and him doing Let Me Land, it's so much argument, but that was just a lesson, and we appreciate you for that.
My head's going to get as big as his, fam. Just expanding.
Episode 21.
I know, with the special guest, Louisa. How was that?
I loved it. Thanks, guys.
Obviously your
enjoyed it.
best. Like,
Yeah,
show
but-
you've done.
Obviously,
Out of
there's-
every single one.
Yeah.
You're our best guest we ever had.
Oh,
I can't remember having another guest. Was it Zach Polanski or someone, whatever. But honestly, Louisa, thank you so much
Oh, thanks,
for coming
guys.
along. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
No, definitely. Please come back as well.
Yes, I will. I was on the BBC on Sunday, and this is such a nice
Come
experience.
on, man.
Come on now.
You got Tarek's mum walking in the back.
I know.
Yeah,
I've been
everything's
offered
good.
tea
Yeah,
about
there you
5
go.
times. It's
The
been really
lads are breaking
dates.
fast dates coming out.
Yeah, it's been really lovely
But
experience.
Stars Dem, I can't recommend enough. Go follow Louisa Munch Theory on all the platforms. Is literally the antidote to brain rot.
Yeah, no, it is.
You will just feel better every time you see her come on your feed.
I was so gassed when I saw you follow me back in the day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the fact that you're now big. It's big.
We've had a bumper episode, absolutely jam packed, lots of learning. We'll leave with a couple recommendations.
Quick recommendations. I actually just want to shout out to the Stars Dem who actually post on Substack. So Muna, she wrote a really good Ramadan reflections on women's labour in Ramadan, which is very overlooked. So people can check that out. We leave that below. And then also Amel Lakewall or Lackle, I don't want to mispronounce her name, but she wrote. She was inspired by one of my TikToks and our conversations to write about Islamic conceptions of freedom.
Lovely
That's
stuff.
real, man. That's real influence.
That's real.
That's
For me,
big.
I similarly got a Substack recommendation from Keir Starmer, whose Substack is She Writes Too Loud. Little Substack called The Misogynists Will Make an Example Out of You. And it's kind of touching on a few things in the London scene and about like the Love Island cheating stuff, but kind of taking it to an esoteric place. I really enjoyed it. How about yourself?
My recommendation is every Adam Curtis documentary. I feel
I was
like.
going to ask if you knew, but when you mentioned Mark Fisher, I was going to be like, you heard it come across.
Well, what we've been talking about today with, what's happening in Iran, he puts those together, into this sort of global history story so well and so much better than I could ever do. And you've taught me a lot today, so thank you. When you do PhD, you end up it's like this.
Very specific.
But it's so
specific.
deep, so you don't get a chance.
I remember being like 14 years old watching Hypernormalization and just trying to follow it, but I couldn't. At that age, I really couldn't.
Shifty is the new one, so good.
Lovely
real.
stuff. So
Definitely check
Adam
it
Curtis
out.
from you is a recommendation for the Stars Dem. But Stars Dem, do that one first. I can't lie. That's the valuable one. But honestly, Louisa Munch Theory, been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been a pleasure, guys. Thank
See you soon.
It's been an honour.